One of my colleagues told me that I'll be testing a British car. What I had in my mind was a Jaguar or a Land Rover. Instead, what I got was this, the MG ZS. But don't close that video tab just yet, because the ZS has been one heck of a bestseller for MG. So perhaps it's time to see what the fuss is all about. Perhaps one of the reasons why people flock to the MG dealerships is because of the way it looks, and I have to say it's a pretty handsome looking little crossover. So you got these wraparound slim looking headlights, and the LED light pattern looks pretty interesting. They call it the London Eye, and it wraps around the projector of the headlight beam, and it suits the car well. Also, you got this wide grille. I mean, there's a lot of manufacturers out there that do this sort of look of grille, but for some reason it suits the ZS rather well. And instead of putting slats in the grille, what they did are honeycomb patterns with a sort of studded look. Interesting. Adding a bit more flair, you get the typical crossover blacked out bottom end, and just to add a bit more bright work outside, you get this faux chrome strip, well, brushed chrome strip. Now, as for the rest of the ZS, well, when you look at it from the side, it's like the center section is bubble shaped, certainly interesting. And that upward sweeping rear window certainly does grab some look. Another thing I also like about the ZS's exterior are the lines. Now, I don't usually say this about crossovers, or, well, mainly because they're all over the place, but it has defined lines, and it certainly brings out a bit more aggression in the design, which is, all in all, generally rounded. Now, as for the rear, I noticed that Chinese automakers, or at least Chinese designed cars, tend to put their license plate holders on the bumper and instead of on the tailgate. So it sort of gives this impression to me that there's a lot of blank space on the tailgate, but thankfully what they did here was put a big MG badge right between the taillights. And interestingly enough, that MG badge also opens your tailgate. Other noteworthy things, well, it rides on pretty sleek looking alloy wheels, and this particular variant, the top of the line model, has a huge panoramic sunroof. As I mentioned, there's a huge panoramic sunroof, so there's a lot of natural light coming into the cabin, and it gives that feeling of airiness inside. But before we get to that, what's in front of me? Now, it has a leather stitch steering wheel with interesting dimples on it, as if they're trying to make it look sportier, even if this car has zero sporting intentions. And there's more of that when you look at the dash. Now, the dash itself is flat-faced here and with a flat top. And that's something, a bit of a retro cue going on for me, well, at least in my eyes. And they added, well, what appears to be faux carbon fiber. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it. I wish they would have added a gloss black piece of trimming here instead. But, well, that's MG and I'm not MG. Now, space here at the front, it's great. Lots of wiggle room for me around the legs. And, well, the round dials, nice contrast from the hard angles from corner to corner of the dash. Now onto the features. This infotainment screen comes with Apple CarPlay, which is personally a huge plus for me. All you have to do is plug in your phone. You don't have to set up your Bluetooth and stuff like that anymore. And the screen is fairly sizable. You also get two USB ports down here and a 12-volt socket. Now, one USB port is to hook up your phone to the infotainment screen. It also has automatic climate control. Again, this is the top spec model, so you probably wouldn't expect less. And you get loads of buttons on the steering wheel. You have your volume control and you have your menus. Now for the instrument cluster, there's a multi-information display right in between the speedometer and tachometer. Now, it still uses the old dot matrix design, so for me at least, it makes the car look old, at least when you're looking at it from the instrument cluster. Had this had been a color screen, it would certainly bring the car to the modern age. Now, another thing I found in here was it has cruise control. And instead of putting the cruise control controls on the steering wheel, they put it on a stock, like, well, older cars. What I do find unusual though is the stock itself. It's pretty thick and it feels like it's the turn signal as well. So you may find yourself confusing one for another. Now certainly my hands, well, found itself on the cruise control stock when I was trying to signal, only to realize that I wasn't signaling in the first place. So there was that. I do admire MG for putting big cubby holes in here. You have one by the driver's side, you have a huge door and bottle holder on each door, each of the front doors at least. And you have two cup holders here. As you have a little cubby hole here at the front as well. And if you're the kind of person who brings a lot of sunglasses with you while you're driving, there's a holder right up here by the sunroof controls. Now, if there's one thing I wish MG would add here at the front, that would be a telescopic wheel. I thought this came with a telescopic wheel because it gave that impression with this piece of cloth that's covering the steering column. Now, when I was adjusting it, I was trying to pull it and nothing's happening. So as it turns out, it's just for tilt. So hopefully, the facelifted model will come with a telescopic steering wheel. So that's the front covered. Let's head on to the back. Here at the back, there really aren't a lot of noteworthy things. You get map pockets here and, well, there's a fair amount of leg room. Granted, this is in my sitting position. But taller drivers, if a taller driver is in front, well, I still have to say that, I still have about this much leg room, so that's not bad at all. Now, the reason why I said there aren't a lot of noteworthy things here at the back, because there's practically nothing to see here, if I'm going to be honest about it. You don't get rear air conditioning vents, and you don't even get a rear armrest. And another thing I noticed, yes, this panoramic sunroof is nice, and personally, I like it. It does eat up quite a lot of headroom. Now, I'm just 5'4". I'm not particularly tall, but I only have about a fist's worth of headroom left. So, say I was about a 6-footer, one can dream, my head would definitely be brushing the ceiling, or I would be forced to move my head, and my head would touch that panoramic sunroof. So even if it does look like a bubble, it actually doesn't have a whole lot of headroom back here. Still, at least you have the impression of space thanks to a lot of light coming into the cabin. So here at the back of the ZS, as I mentioned, good leg room, not much to see inside, not a lot of headroom, unless, well, you don't mind hitting your head against the glass roof. So when you open the tailgate of a ZS, you'd think that on first impression, well, this thing can carry a lot of stuff. And the floor of the cargo area is rather deep, so you can load taller items. However, when you take a closer look at it, you'll notice that the wheel wells really compromise of what could have been extra cargo space. So had MG moved these wheel wells a little further away, you'd have much more usable space here. But they tried to be clever with it nonetheless. So they added these little cargo nets on each side so you could put smaller items and they don't roll around in the trunk. And as I mentioned, it has a deep cargo floor. Now that's good if you want to store tall items, but getting them into the ZS might be a bit of a challenge because that results in a high liftover. So that's when you're picking up something heavy from the ground and you have to lift it all the way up this huge lip, which goes all the way down here. So perhaps they can make that tailgate cut down that little bit bigger, just so it's easier to slide items in and out. And hopefully in the redesigned version, they move these wheel wells. So that just makes the space much more efficient here in the cargo area. You can load tall items, but wide items might be a bit of an issue at the back here. So we've taken a look at the exterior of the car, and we've also taken a look at the interior of the car. So you're probably wondering then what the ZS or ZS is like on the road. Well, as a daily runabout, I found it totally fine. Actually, rather find it comfortable. However, there are a few niggles here and there. So if you're hearing a rattle, that's from three sources. One, that's from the camera mount. The second one is from the sunroof, curiously. And the third one, there's a faint rattle by the driver's door for some reason. And that's the thing, because I had an MG6 and the build quality on that car was fantastic. It was well put together, no squeaks, no rattles, none of that. So again, I hope that this particular unit is a different case, because, well, it's really nice inside here, to be honest. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the finer points of the ZS. These seats are great. There's lots of support under your thigh, on your thighs, and a fair bit of lumbar support. And that's a good thing, because if you're going to go on a long drive, you don't want your seat to be too soft that you're going to sink in them, and you don't want them too stiff that you're going to get backache from them. So the seats here are just right, and there are even nice supports for your legs in each corner, almost like a bucket seat even. And you probably noticed us going over a bump there. I wouldn't say the ZS's ride is totally firm. It sounds firm because it makes a bit of a sound, a bit of a noise when you're driving over them, but it doesn't rattle you, it doesn't send a shock up your spine or any of that. So ride in general, pretty good, it's pretty comfortable. And of course, it's supported by these supportive seats too. Now onto the subject of handling. Now, this is a crossover. And you're really not going to bring this to a track day now, are you? But that said, it's fairly competent. The steering feel and feedback is there, even if it is, in general, pretty light. And it does tell you where the front wheels are pointed, which is something that's lacking in cars with electronic power steering. So communicative steering, I have to give it that. As for performance, well, it's a 1.5 liter with less than 120 horsepower. So this is definitely not a sports car. I mean, just look at it. But I'm not saying it's slow though. And for its purpose, which is basically a daily runabout or a crossover you bring to your kids to your school and stuff like that, performance, all in all, is adequate. It's never going to leave you hanging. It's never really going to leave you shortchanged and all that. Of course, there are limitations to that. If you want to accelerate to 100 kilometers per hour, it might take a bit of time, but again, you're not going to mash the throttle when you merge onto the highway. You gently roll in to the cruising speed. However, the transmission, well, we'll have to talk about that because it is a 4-speed unit. And in an era where you either put a CVT or at the very least a 6-speed automatic, a 4 just sounds rather antiquated. And it kind of blunts engine performance as well. Well, when you put it in manual mode, that's where the engine sort of comes alive and all that. But leave it to its own devices. Shifting can be a bit slow, can be a bit slurred. But you find the right way to drive it, so to speak. And it can be a smoother experience. It's not going to be fast drive, but it's going to be relatively smooth. So the ZS, I would say, covers all the daily driver prerequisites. It's easy on fuel, it's comfortable, easy to park, easy to drive, feels light, and all that. And that should please just about a majority of non-car enthusiasts. If you're looking for a more soul-engaging experience, well, the ZS probably isn't for you, but that's not the point of this crossover. The point of this crossover is to bring you from point A to B with as little fuss as possible. Well, it won't really surprise and delight you, but it will get you to where you're going. Now, for the past couple of days, I've been trying to find what the fuzz is all about with the ZS, and I think I know why, and why it's become such a big seller for MG. Now, what you get is a stylish, relatively high off the ground, and practical crossover for less than 1 million pesos. And if that's not enticing, I don't know what is. At 998,888 pesos, yeah, it's almost a million pesos, 1,112 pesos to be exact. But there's that psychological 1 million peso barrier that stops people from shelling out just that little bit more. And this is the top of the line model already. So imagine you're getting a fully loaded car for less than a million pesos, and it's a crossover. So I have to say that's pretty enticing indeed. This ZS, it's a competent car, and it's not perfect, but it's certainly one you can consider, especially if you're looking for a crossover on a budget. Now, this has been Anton and Jess from AutoIndustriya.com. If you enjoyed this video, do please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you own a ZS, do leave a comment in this video what your ownership experience has been like and stuff like that. And while you're at it, don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well. Thanks for watching.